There are moments in life when humiliation seems to stain the soul like ink on paper. Moments when shame clings to you so tightly it feels as if the whole world is staring, mocking, whispering about your failures. Perhaps you've been laughed at for your weakness, ridiculed for your innocence, or betrayed by those who should have stood beside you. Maybe you've been pushed to the ground while others watched and rejoiced, certain you would never rise again. And perhaps the cruelest part of humiliation is that it is often public. The wound of betrayal may pierce the heart in private, but humiliation throws salt into the wound, exposing it before others. It is a stripping of dignity, a tearing away of the garment of respect. Yet, here is the mystery. Humiliation, as devastating as it feels, is not the end of your story. In fact, humiliation often marks the very soil where God chooses to plant His most radiant glory. What others meant to destroy you becomes the foundation upon which God builds your restoration. What they thought would bury you becomes the very stage upon which heaven displays its brilliance. Think for a moment of the seed that is buried beneath the earth. To the eye of the world, it is covered in dirt, hidden, forgotten. Yet, what looks like burial is actually preparation. The darkness is not a grave, but a womb. The soil that seemed to suffocate is the very environment where roots grow deep and where life is being formed, unseen. And one day, that small seed breaks through the dirt, not as it was buried, but transformed, stronger, and destined to bear fruit. So it is with your humiliation. You may feel hidden, rejected, silenced, cast aside. But in the hidden place, God is weaving His plan. He is forming something in you that the eyes of those who mocked you cannot yet see. And when the time comes, He will not simply lift you out of the dirt. He will cause you to rise in such a way that those who scorned you will have no choice but to witness the glory He places upon your life. Have you considered that humiliation may actually be a divine setup? That the very moments of shame are allowed not to weaken you forever, but to prepare you for a restoration so radiant it cannot be denied? You see, God does not simply balance the scales, He overflows them. He doesn't just end humiliation, He turns it into honor. He doesn't just restore what was lost, He multiplies it. And this is the truth humiliation tries to hide. It is temporary. It whispers, "This is your end. This is your identity. You will always be marked by this failure, this betrayal, this ridicule." But humiliation is a liar. It has no authority over the child of God. For the author of your story has already written the next chapter, and it is one of restoration, of honor, of greater glory. Pause here and think. What if the things you fear the most, the sneers, the laughter, the disgrace, are nothing more than scaffolding for a divine stage? What if the very people who sought to humiliate you will one day be forced to watch as God exalts you? What if your deepest shame becomes the canvas upon which He paints His most beautiful masterpiece? Do not despise your humiliation, for though it wounds, it will not last. Though it feels like loss, it is the soil of gain. Though it strips you of pride, it opens you to glory that is not of man, but of God. And when He restores you, it will not be in a corner, unseen. It will be in such a way that even those who mocked you must acknowledge His hand upon your life. This is the promise of humiliation redeemed. God will not only lift you from the dust, He will crown you with greater glory. God allows humiliation to shape humility, but never to destroy you. There is a hidden work of God that often takes place in the shadows of humiliation. When you are ridiculed, when others laugh at your weakness, when whispers of your failure echo in rooms you cannot enter, something begins to break inside you. Pride crumbles, self-dependence fractures, and the illusions of control dissolve. Humiliation is painful because it exposes the fragile places we try so desperately to protect. But God, in His wisdom, allows certain moments of humiliation to press against us, not to crush us, but to purify us. Imagine gold placed in the furnace. The heat is fierce, almost unbearable, yet it is necessary. Without the fire, impurities remain clinging to the metal. So it is with the soul. When humiliation comes, it feels as though you are placed in the furnace of exposure. You feel stripped, fragile, and undone. But in truth, what is being removed are the impurities that cannot follow you into the next season of glory. Pride cannot survive the fire, arrogance cannot withstand the heat, selfishness cannot remain when humiliation has stripped you bare. And once those impurities are removed, humility is born. Humility is not weakness, it is strength under God's control. It is the recognition that without Him you can do nothing, and with Him nothing is impossible. Humiliation may bring you to your knees, but on your knees is exactly where God desires to meet you. It is on your knees that prayer deepens, that dependence grows, that worship becomes pure. Think of those who walk with great authority in life. Many of them have passed through deep valleys of shame and ridicule. It is not by accident. God cannot place the weight of glory upon a soul that is still puffed with pride, for pride corrupts glory and turns it into idolatry. But when humility has been formed through humiliation, the vessel becomes safe to carry His power, His favor, and His blessing. Have you ever noticed that humiliation has a way of silencing your defenses? When others accuse you, you may want to fight back, to prove yourself, to defend your reputation. Yet often in humiliation, God holds your tongue. He allows silence to teach you that your vindication does not come from men, but from Him. And in that silence, you discover something precious. You do not need to prove yourself, because the one who sees all is already preparing your defense. The enemy intends humiliation to destroy your spirit. He whispers that you will never recover, that this shame will follow you forever. But God, in His sovereignty, transforms humiliation into the birthplace of humility. And humility in the kingdom of God is not a curse, but a crown. For He Himself has said that the humble will be lifted and the proud will fall. When humiliation presses against you, remember this truth. It is not the final chapter. It is only the refining fire preparing you for a weight of glory that can only rest upon a humble heart. What was used to shame you will become your testimony of victory. There is a divine irony woven into the fabric of God's justice. The very thing the enemy used to shame you will one day shine as the testimony of your victory. What once made you bow your head in sorrow will become the very story that causes you to lift your head in triumph. What was once your deepest embarrassment will be transformed into the most powerful evidence of God's hand upon your life. Consider the broken pieces of your past, the failures, the betrayals, the cruel laughter of others. At the time, they seemed unbearable. Perhaps you lay awake at night replaying the words that cut you, the mistakes that haunted you, the shame that clung to you like a heavy garment. Yet God does not waste pain. He does not overlook humiliation. He gathers every fragment of your suffering and weaves it into a greater tapestry. What others meant for evil, He intends for good. That is not a hollow phrase. It is the unshakable law of His kingdom. Those who mocked your weakness will one day see strength flowing from the very area they ridiculed. Those who laughed at your fall will one day marvel at the height to which He lifts you. And when you tell your story, it will not be a tale of defeat, but a testimony of redemption. Think of how scars work upon the body. At first they are raw, painful, and unsightly. You may wish they were not there, reminders of wounds you'd rather forget. But as time passes, the wound heals and the scar remains, not as a mark of shame, but as evidence of survival. It says, "I was wounded, but I did not die. I was cut, but I was healed. What tried to destroy me only proved that I could endure." So it is with humiliation. What once shamed you becomes a scar of victory, a visible testimony that God was greater than your pain. And here lies the beauty of God's restoration. He does not erase your past as though it never happened. Instead, He redeems it. He takes the very story that caused your humiliation and turns it into a song of glory. You will find yourself speaking of things you once hid in silence because the shame will no longer cling to you. The power of humiliation will be broken, replaced by the power of testimony. And when you speak, others will find hope. Your testimony will not just be for you, it will become a lifeline for those walking through their own valleys of humiliation. You will become living proof that God can take shame and turn it into honor, that He can take disgrace and weave it into destiny. So do not despise the areas of your life that once brought humiliation. They are the soil from which your greatest testimony will grow. In the hands of God, what once mocked you will one day magnify Him. God's timing turns private pain into public restoration. There is a rhythm to God's work that often baffles the human heart. We cry for restoration in the moment of our deepest humiliation, begging Him to vindicate us quickly, to silence the voices of mockery, to wipe away the stain of shame before it sets too deeply. Yet heaven works on a different clock. God does not rush to rescue, not because He is indifferent, but because His timing is perfect, and His restoration, when it comes, is not small or hidden. It is so profound that those who once laughed will have no choice but to witness His glory upon your life. Think of the seasons of nature. There is winter, long and barren, where life seems frozen, where branches stand naked against the cold wind and nothing blooms. You may look at the trees and think they are dead, stripped and lifeless, but deep beneath the soil, roots are spreading, strengthening, unseen by the human eye, and then, suddenly, spring arrives. Blossoms burst forth, fragrance fills the air, and what seemed lifeless becomes radiant with color. That is the way of God's restoration. For a season, your humiliation may feel like a long winter. You may walk with bowed head, wondering if the shame will ever end. But in His appointed time, spring comes, and when it does, the very people who thought you were finished will marvel at the beauty of what God has brought forth from your life. Your pain, though private, is never unnoticed. God has recorded every tear. He has heard the sighs that escaped your lips in the silence of night. And though others saw your humiliation, they did not see the depth of your suffering. They did not witness the private battles you fought, the prayers whispered in exhaustion, the moments you almost gave up. But God saw it all, and His restoration will not be measured merely by what was lost in public, but by every hidden pain endured in private. He is just, and justice demands that what was suffered in silence will be repaid openly. This is why God delays. He allows the story to unfold so that when restoration comes, it carries the weight of undeniable glory. If He lifted you too soon, your enemies could argue it was by chance, by luck, by your own effort. But when He waits until the humiliation is deep, until the loss seems irreversible, until the shame feels permanent, then His restoration becomes undeniable. It is seen as His work alone. And this restoration will not be done in secret. Just as your humiliation was public, so will your vindication be. God will not allow those who mocked you to remain blind to your elevation. They will see it, and they will know that it was the hand of God. not because you proved yourself, but because He displayed His power. So hold steady in the waiting. Do not mistake delay for denial. For in the timing of God, private pain is being transformed into the soil of public restoration. And when the season changes, you will rise, not quietly, not secretly, but openly, before the eyes of those who once thought you would never rise again. Your enemies will become witnesses of God's glory on your life. One of the most striking truths in the story of God's justice is this: those who set out to humiliate you will not escape witnessing your restoration. He does not hide His blessings from your enemies. He displays them. The very ones who laughed when you stumbled will be the ones to watch when He lifts you higher than they ever imagined. The stage of your elevation is set so that even those who despised you cannot look away. There is a reason for this. Humiliation thrives in the gaze of others. It is not just the event itself that wounds, but the knowledge that people saw it, mocked it, whispered about it. And so, in His perfect justice, God chooses to reverse that gaze. Just as they once looked upon your shame, so they must now look upon your glory. It is not for your revenge, but for His vindication. It is not to satisfy your ego, but to magnify His hand. They will see that the one they rejected was chosen, that the one they mocked was favored, that the one they tried to bury was lifted by God Himself. Think of a courtroom. When a person is falsely accused, the trial is public, the accusations shouted, the evidence distorted. The humiliation is on display. But when the verdict of innocence is finally read, it is not whispered in a corner, it is declared in the same courtroom before the same witnesses. Why? Because justice must not only be done, it must be seen. So it is with God. He does not restore you privately when you have been humiliated publicly. He ensures that the same eyes that saw your disgrace will see your honor. And here is the beautiful irony. Your enemies become unwilling witnesses of your testimony. They may not clap, they may not rejoice, they may not acknowledge you with words, but they cannot deny what they see, and what they see will trouble them, because the blessing is undeniable, the restoration too clear, the glory too radiant. They will have no choice but to admit in their hearts that it was God who lifted you. Do not think it strange if the same people who humiliated you are present in the season of your restoration. It is not an accident. God positions them there not to share in your joy, but to witness His justice. They thought they were spectators of your downfall, but God has made them spectators of His redemption. And when that moment comes, you will not need to boast. You will not need to remind them of their cruelty. You will not need to say a word. Your life itself will speak louder than any argument. The glory upon you will testify. The favor will shine too brightly to be ignored. The tables will turn, not by your hand, but by His. So trust this: your humiliation is not the end. Those who mocked you have written only half the story. The author is not finished, and when he writes the next chapter, he will invite them to read it with their own eyes. And in that chapter, your enemies will see what humiliation tried to hide, that you were chosen, beloved, and destined for glory. Humiliation is temporary, but God's glory is eternal. Every wound you carry, every word of ridicule spoken against you, every moment of shame you endured, it feels so permanent when you are in the middle of it. Humiliation settles into the soul like an endless winter, convincing you that the cold will never lift, that the icy laughter of others will echo forever. But here is the truth hidden in the heart of eternity. Humiliation is fleeting. It is but a shadow passing over your path. The glory God has prepared for you, however, is eternal. Think of the rising of the sun. Before dawn, the night seems endless. Darkness whispers that morning will never come. Yet, without fail, the sun rises. And when it rises, the shadows vanish and the light claims dominion over the sky. So it is with God's glory. The humiliation you face is but a night season. It cannot outlast the dawn. He has appointed for you, when His glory breaks forth, humiliation will dissolve like mist before the morning light. And then His glory breaks forth. Humiliation will dissolve like mist before the morning light. The human heart often magnifies shame, making it appear larger than life. We replay the cruel words, the mocking laughter, the painful betrayals until they feel like eternal verdicts written against us. But eternity does not bend to humiliation. Eternity bends to glory. The shame that feels endless will one day seem small compared to the weight of honor God places upon you. For His restoration is not measured in days or years, it is measured in forever. Consider how fragile humiliation really is. It depends on the opinions of men, and opinions shift like sand in the wind. Today they ridicule, tomorrow they move on to another target. Today they mock, tomorrow they forget. But God's glory is not built on opinion, it is built on truth. What He declares about you cannot be revoked, cannot be erased, cannot be undone. His word is eternal, and when He speaks honor over your life, no voice of mockery can drown it out. And more than this, humiliation fades because it is rooted in what is mortal. It attaches itself to earthly events, to temporary failures, to fleeting seasons of pain. But the glory of God is rooted in what is eternal. It is drawn not from your weakness, but from His strength, not from your shame, but from His majesty. And that glory, once revealed, does not pass away. It settles upon you like a crown, a mark of His favor that endures beyond the reach of humiliation. This is why you must not allow humiliation to define you. It is not your identity, it is a passing season. Do not build your life around the opinions of those who mocked you. Do not etch their laughter into your soul as though it were permanent ink. It is but chalk on the board, easily wiped away by the hand of God. His glory is the ink, indelible and eternal. Lift your eyes then from the fleeting to the eternal. Let the temporary sting of humiliation remind you that greater glory is coming, glory that will outlast the voices of mockery, glory that will shine when those voices are silenced and forgotten. For humiliation is a visitor. It comes, it stays for a while, and then it leaves. But God's glory is a dwelling place, a home in which your soul will rest forever. God restores with multiplication, not just replacement. When people think of restoration, they often imagine balance. What was taken will be given back, what was lost will be returned, what was broken will be repaired. But God's restoration is far greater. He does not merely replace what was lost, He multiplies it. He does not simply return you to where you were before humiliation, He elevates you to a place beyond what you imagined. His restoration is abundant, overflowing, pressed down and running over. Look at the rhythm of creation itself. One seed planted does not return as a single seed. It returns as a stalk, a tree, a vine heavy with fruit. What is sown in the soil always comes back multiplied. So too with humiliation. What was buried in shame becomes the soil from which multiplied honor springs forth. What was marked as failure becomes the root of multiplied victory. God does not give back in equal measure, He gives back in abundance. This principle is woven throughout His dealings with humanity. When His people were enslaved, He did not just deliver them, He led them to a land flowing with milk and honey. When honor was stripped away, he did not merely restore it. He clothed his children in robes of righteousness, crowns of glory. This is the way of God. He will not allow the pain you endured to return empty. Every tear becomes a seed, every humiliation becomes soil, and from that soil he brings forth a harvest that overwhelms what was lost. Think of your life for a moment. Perhaps you lost dignity when others mocked you. Perhaps opportunities were stolen through betrayal. Perhaps relationships were shattered, leaving you exposed to ridicule. If restoration were only replacement, it might give you back what you lost, but you would remain the same. God's heart is greater than that. He intends to give you more than what was taken. Where you lost dignity, he gives multiplied honor. Where you lost opportunities, he opens greater doors than the ones that closed. Where relationships failed, he surrounds you with love that overflows. And when this restoration comes, it silences every doubt, because it is not logical, it is abundant, it makes no sense to human reasoning, and that is precisely why it magnifies him. The mockers may have said, "They will never recover." But when God restores with multiplication, even your enemies must confess, "This is beyond what we expected. This is beyond what we imagined." This is why you must hold on when humiliation seems final. What feels like devastation today is only the planting of seeds. God has a harvest in mind. He has multiplication in his heart. He will not allow your story to end with mere replacement. For he is not a God of balance. He is a God of abundance. So trust this. Humiliation may take, but God will return more. Shame may strip, but God will clothe with double honor. Pain may bury, but God will cause a multiplied harvest to rise. And when it does, you will stand, not where you once stood, but far higher, lifted by the abundance of his restoration. The story ends with glory, not humiliation. Every story told by man has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when humiliation strikes, it feels as if your story has already ended. The laughter of others becomes the final chapter. The betrayal feels like the last sentence. The silence after shame seems to close the book. But God is the true author of your story, and he never allows humiliation to have the final word. Where man writes "finished," he writes "to be continued." Where the enemy shouts "defeated," he declares "victorious." And where humiliation appears to end your story, God steps in to pen a new chapter, filled with glory. Consider how humiliation works. It is loud, dramatic, and cruel. It seeks to brand you, to define you forever by one moment, one failure, one season of ridicule. But God does not allow temporary events to define eternal destinies. He takes the ink of humiliation and rewrites it with the language of restoration. What was meant to reduce you becomes the very setup for your rising. What was mocked as weakness becomes the platform for his strength. And what was used to disgrace you becomes the canvas for his glory. Think of a tapestry. On the underside, the threads are tangled, messy, and confusing. If you look only at that side, you might think the picture is ruined. But when the tapestry is turned over, a beautiful image is revealed. Carefully designed, full of color and meaning. Your humiliation is the underside. It looks messy, tangled, senseless. But God sees the other side. He knows how the threads weave together into something glorious. And one day, he will turn the tapestry over, and all will see the beauty he's been creating through the pain. Your life, then, is not defined by humiliation, but by what God does after it. The ridicule is temporary, but the glory is eternal. The laughter of your enemies is loud, but it will fade. The vindication of God is quiet at first, but it will endure forever. He ensures that your story does not end in shame, but in honor, not in disgrace, but in restoration. And here lies the hope he must cling to, no matter how deep the humiliation, no matter how painful the ridicule, no matter how final the shame feels. Your story does not end there. God has already written a greater ending, and that ending is glory. Beloved, let these truths settle deep into your spirit. Humiliation may be your current chapter, but it is not the conclusion. God allows it to strip away pride, to form humility, to shape your soul into a vessel fit for His glory. He takes the very things used to shame you and turns them into testimonies of victory. He delays, not to deny you, but to reveal His perfect timing when private pain becomes public restoration. He ensures that your enemies, those who mocked, those who betrayed, those who ridiculed, become unwilling witnesses to His hand upon your life. And never forget, humiliation is temporary. It is a fleeting shadow. But God's glory is eternal. It endures beyond time, beyond mockery, beyond shame. And when He restores, He does not merely replace, He multiplies. He gives more than was taken, more than was lost, more than you could have imagined. So lift your head. Do not live as though shame has written your story's end. Your life is authored by God, and His stories never close in disgrace. They end in glory. And the glory He will place upon you will be so radiant, so undeniable, that even those who mocked you will bow in silence before His work. Hold on then. Do not despise the season of humiliation. For soon, very soon, the author of your story will turn the page. And when He does, the ending will not be shame. It will be honor, restoration, and greater glory than you have ever known.